Just give me a second. Just give me a second here. Okay. I assume you can all see my screen.
Yes, it is visible. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got quite a few discussion points in here, and I will cover as much of it as possible within the designated 20 minutes. And because of the time, I may skip some slides, if you don't mind. So just give you a brief background for all the battery energy storage project in Eskom. It's roughly about approximately 11 billion rand program, and it covers two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. We're here today for the licensing associated with phase 1. Typically, we're expecting the construction periods to execute between 7 to 9 months. And coupled to that, we have a post period, let's call it an ops and maintenance period after the capital project of roughly about 5 years or 60 months as well. For perspective, the phase 1 is about 8 sites. If I use phase 1 is about eight sites. We want to complete phase 1 around June of 2023, and then there's a phase 2 which will follow about a year later. We hope to complete some of those projects. But it's again, the aim of the project is we want to increase capacity around 1,440 megawatt hours per day in the battery energy storage. And typically in the phase 2 of the program, there's some PV as well included. There's a lot of drivers that support transformational aspects, and I've listed quite extensively some of the SDNI or local supplier development and industrialization levers that we want to use along the way. The funding of the projects, basically from the Clean Technology Fund, the World Bank, the African Development Fund, the New Development Bank. Those are the significant funders and role players within the project. The IRP in 2019, I just indicate for clarity that we did submit an application for DMRE to DMRE to support our Section 34 process, the concurrence process, which we've been successful, and it's utilized from the storage capacity made available from 2029 brought forward for us for our utilization as Eskom. There's an extract of the RFD on the concurrence issued on the 25th of February. I won't go through that, but basically saying we've had a concurrence and we've had the award, and we're in the process now of doing the license. Just a brief background in terms of the history of where we're coming from on battery energy storage. Originally, the fund, it started around the granting of the loan facility. That facility supported some projects that reduce carbon footprint together with the Medupi project. And that was associated with the Majuba Rail project, the Sere wind farm, and the Kiwano at that time was the CSP or concentrated solar plant. Majuba Rail and Sere wind farm projects are the Sere wind farm definitely in commissioning and up and running, Majuba Rail about to be completed. And the Kiwano project was what was later converted into the battery energy project when there was a decision made to change the technology rather and go for battery energy storage. And that you can see in the best inception from around 2016. That required a process for us to go through from the World Bank as well as ourselves in terms of approvals, the World Bank acceptance, the Eskom approvals, and that process basically took a while. But eventually we've got to a point where we've got all the agreements and approvals in place for us to continue with the execution. We've been out to the market, and we went out to the market on 2021 in terms of execution. And now we have already finalized the bids and the bid contracts, and we're finalizing now we're in the process with this finalizing the NASA license application. Just typically, we just got an echo here. Okay.
Whoever has just joined, perhaps can you switch off your mic, please? Thanks.
Okay, the echo's gone. Just in terms of where we are, best phase 1 and phase 2, the locations for those, and I think the affected parties in the areas will definitely know. It's split up between phase 1, and these are typically package 1, package 2, this was part of package 2, package 3. So all the, let's call it the lighter red sites, which are all part of phase 1, and they're scattered around the Cape, from the Cape, Northern Cape, and the Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape, and the KwaZulu-Natal. Package 4, for want of, just to understand, there is a package 4 that we've introduced as part of phase 1 that's still going to go to market around the Rietfontein area, and we were unsuccessful in our, let's call it, we had a non-responsive bid around Malcote, and those 2 packages are going to be reissued to the market. Phase 2 is clearly defined. You can see the Kuano, Kuprum, Witzenberg, and Ashton sites, and those are clear sites around the country which will go into the phase 2 phase. A reminder again, the application that we're doing now relates to all phase 1 sites, so all the red sites. Move on to the next slide. From that geographical breakdown, I've listed the table of the breakdown of typically what we're referring to now in terms of phase 1 and phase 2. If you look strictly at the phase 1 area, you can see the distribution in terms of where the sites are physically. You can see the battery energy storage megawatt outputs in each one of those sites, totaling to nearly 200 megawatts, 199. You can see the daily megawatt hour capacities for each one of the sites, and a reflective total annual award annual energy in terms of megawatt hours for those sites as well. There is a very small portion of PV on the one side, Rietfontein, and there's a very important reason why in terms of that area of Rietfontein. We've also indicated what the uses are, and we can go into it later if we have time in terms of all the uses that battery energy can provide. And I have a colleague here that can address that if need be. But basically, they talk to reactive power, support, load shaving, energy support, and ancillary services around the sites. So this is our applications for these sites in phase 1 currently. In terms of battery energy storage phase 2, there is 144 megawatts of output. In megawatt hours into about 616 on the four sites, and the total annual. There is a greater portion of PV on phase 2, and of course the uses are listed. Okay, some of the issues that generally come up around the battery energy projects and typically relate to the environmental public participation or social participation. In terms of the regulations, most of it, a basic assessment, it is required for phase 1 and for phase 2 sites. And there's various objectives associated with the basic assessment process in terms of identifying the relevant authorities, the key stakeholders to engage, disclosure of information to authorities and the stakeholders, identifying potential issues and environmental impacts, assessing the significance of the potential environmental impacts, describe and investigate alternatives that have been and or could be considered, and provide feasible mitigation measures to address any of the significant impacts identified. So we've been through an extensive process around phase 1, and I can share some of the results. Basically, we've received no appeals, objections to the environmental authorizations issued for the phase 1 sites as we stand now. Just in terms of status of where we are, we have environmental authorizations for all the phase 1 sites. We have approved plans for at least 3 of them currently, and the status is changing continuously. And we have draft EMPR approvals in place for some of the sites. And why we say we have draft? because remember we went out to the market. The final designs or the final technology choices determine the final EMPRs for those sites. And hence, once those final designs are completed, the various EMPRs or the environmental management plans or programs will be updated accordingly with the technology, with the sensitivities associated with the environmental issues on the site, whether that be water runoff or the like, and the final site layouts. And those, so we have draft approvals, which are updated with the final technologies and the final choices. So that's the status for phase 1. There is a similar status for phase 2, but we notice we're still going through the phases of EIA approvals and basic assessments on those sites. In terms of the stakeholder management, all the best sites have either held stakeholder engagement with the relevant role players, including mayoral councils, municipality officials, and we've introduced the battery energy storage projects to get buy-in and support from all the various areas. That's not a once-off exercise. It's a continuous process as we stand from now till the completion of the projects in terms of construction, and of course, and in the periods afterwards with the support for those various areas. So up to date, municipalities have welcomed the projects in their respective areas and have pledged their full support to Eskom. In terms of our next steps, there is a lot of engagement around localization in terms of the appointment of project steering committees in the various best sites, projects, and you finalize terms of reference in terms of how we're going to encourage local economic development in those areas. We set up what we call a best project stakeholder forums and all-inclusive engagement or platforms to manage the community issues are addressed there. Traditional leaders and indigenous peoples are part of these engagements. In terms of corporate social investments, because the projects are scattered throughout the country, we are creating a central, what we're calling a best CSI committee, and that will establish centrally so that we can make sure that we can coordinate all the activities around the various sites in terms of CSI initiatives, and that none of them get left out. Next steps in terms of the stakeholders, management, we're appointing CLOs or customer liaison officers at the different sites, and they will be rolled out and completed by the end of the month. We're setting up the best stakeholder forums, and that also will be completed by the end of the month. And we're continuously working on the marketing and the publicity of the battery energy storage program in terms of the execution, both internally to Eskom and Eskom sites, as well as externally to the public. A high level in terms of the phases in terms of the schedule of phase 1, and what's typically, if you notice, we've split it up into the package 1, 2, and 3 that's already been in the market, package 4 that will be still going into the market. You can see we've started around March 2021. We're in this process now of obtaining LERSA licenses, and we've been a long process to now. We've worked through the contract award and effective dates on the current packages 1, 2, and 3. We're updating all those EMPRs that I mentioned earlier, and then there's a long process of ordering long leads and deliveries to site for certain long lead items, and in the construction. And we want to target that by March of 23, at least, that we can get some commissioning of some of the sites that have advanced already in terms of delivery. Similarly, with the package 4, all the same activities have to happen. It'll just move out a little bit in terms of when we want to complete. At this point, we're targeting around June 23, we can finish package 3. I've got a high-level area share around the best block diagram, and if time permits, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask my colleague to Mfundi Zongo to run through basically the next few slides. It'll cover a high-level block, a typical site, and then a high level in terms of the uses that we are doing on the project. I think Mfundi will introduce himself. Thank you, Chair. Just give me a second to pause.
All right. Before he does, I would need to then have him sworn in as well, for him to be able to, if he can just show his face, please. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I can see you. Can I firstly ask, would you object to taking an oath? Mr. Songo, would you object?
Good afternoon, good morning, colleagues, Chairperson. My name is Mfundi Songo. I'm the Senior Manager for the BEST project on the engineering side.
Before you do,
I would like to take you
before
through
you do, for me, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me?
No, I can't hear.
You can't hear me?
No.
All right, can I, because I do need to swear you in first before you speak.
Oh, sorry, Chairperson, my volume had some issues. Thank you.
All right, now you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Firstly, can I just ask, would you object to taking an oath?
No objection.
All right, in that case, kindly raise your right hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence or the information you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
For the record, kindly state your name, the organization you're representing, and your designation therein, please.
My name is Mfundi Erasmus Songo. I am a Senior Manager, Engineering in Eskom Distribution.
Thank you. You can go ahead now. Apologies to disturb your flow. Please proceed.
No, thank you. I had volume issues.
You can share your slides as well. And if it's going to improve your presentation, you can switch your video off as well. But that's your choice. But you can share your slides.
Thank you. I'm sharing the slide now. Show it here.
I can see it.
Share it forward.
Visible, we can proceed.
Yes, Chairperson, we're just having a small technical issue on sharing. It will reflect now. Apologies, audience.
Okay, it's visible. You can proceed.
Yes. In this slide, I'm just explaining the whole block of what a battery storage technology is for those that are not clear about what it is, because it's new technology, the high-level block diagram and where it actually applies. If you look at where the battery energy storage program is, we have got various storage facilities. The whole block that you see here, that is in blue, is all locked up. You cannot see anything. It's more or less like a locked box. But what it is, when it comes to the building on the right-hand side, that is exactly how it will look like on our Eskom sites. On the right-hand side, we've got the arrow. You will have the substation, and then you'll have lines coming in, and then you'll have the whole yard that has to be cleared to ensure that the battery storage and that yard might have a little bit of some drainage issues, some roads, and safety issues that have to be considered. Next slide. Yes. I'm having a delay here, Chairperson. I don't know why. Let me just change my laptop.
It's okay. We can still hear you. We can proceed. We can hear you. Please continue. Colleagues, I am worried about time. Remember, we are working towards time, so kindly proceed. We can see the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Now I'm on the clear. There are typical types of technologies. What we have for this storage program, it is the lithium type of batteries. Where have they been applied in the world? We had to go all over the world and check to ensure that we work with something that was worked. It's there in the USA on the left-hand side. It's there in the UK on the right-hand side, the second one. And it's there too in the Texan, which is in the USA. And our project supports the transformational aspects of demonstrating how these large-scale systems work in together with the renewable energy space to ensure that we are here to local challenges, which are employment, which are environmental, and which are technological as well. In terms of the advantages of battery facilities, why would we use them? The battery storage is simply a switch on and off. It is incredibly fast, precise, and controllable. It has got zero minimum generation of emissions. In terms of deployment, as my fellow colleague has explained it can be deployed in a very short time, from 6 months upwards, depending on the size. And it has got no geographical constraint that can limit it. It is modular, which means that you can scale it and have as many as you want. It has got a high round trip efficiency of about 85%. Most technologies would have an efficiency of, say, about, for example, solar PVs and the like, have got an efficiency of less than even 20%. It can be designed as a bulletproof and long life infrastructure. On the right-hand side, we are showing you a typical 50 megawatt gas picker versus a battery energy storage facility. For a gas picker, you'll need about minutes to dispatch it. Yet with the grid connected BESS projects, you need a couple of seconds, as you can see. Now, in terms of the main use cases, to explain the graph on the illustration on the left-hand side, the energy supports, it can be used for load leveling. As you know, right now, we have a peak generation, which is the normal mountain, and then we have the dipping. Now, during the time when we have got the normal base load, we can be charging the battery. And then when we have got peak loading, we discharge the batteries and then they discharge into the grid, which at the bottom is shown as red. Now, the total generated power requirement for the for discharge will be measured and calculated over a cycle of 24 hours. It can also be used for frequency regulation, which will be used for the balancing of supply and demand. And it can also be used for capital investment deferral. For example, where we don't have to build a long line, for example, the Rietfontein that is being mentioned, we have to build a line of about 300 kilometers, which can cost us close to 800 million. We will defer that investment. We will not disturb the landscape. We will not go for an EIA, and land participation will take about 7 to 8 years. And that is how it actually simplifies things for us. In terms of the main uses, which I've just mentioned, it can be used for grid demand, which is the first line in purple. It can be used for solar, for balancing wind and PV supplies, which are intermittent, which means that, for example, from around 8 up until 4 p.m., solar is generating, but from around 6 p.m. up to the early hours of the morning, there is no solar. Therefore, you've got zero output from the PV plants. But if you store that energy during the day, then when it's required in the evening, you discharge it. And that is how it will actually assist us. And then we release the energy. The graph on the right-hand side shows a typical 2 megawatt PV plant production and how it behaves. And then below, it shows the storage and how you release the energy when it is required. And then in terms of where we are going into the economy, How does this link to the economy? My colleague Luke will take over.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In terms of growing the, I think basically the bottom line is what we've included in all the contracts is where we can support on the current phase 1 is around civils, survey and geotechnical issues, network integrations, shipping, construction, security and installation. So our aim, and it's always been our aim, is to see how well these projects can support localization and development. We recognize that there's much more that we can do, and there's much more that we will do in phase 2 and any other future projects in this area in the battery space. But we certainly view the development of local industry as a critical part of government's socio-economic and transformation development agenda. So, Chair, some of the typical lessons we've learned to date, these are not extensive. These are what we've learned in the process of us executing and delivering on the battery project. A lot of front-end engineering in terms of development we need to focus on. We also believe the best market, the maturity of the battery energy market is not quite there yet in terms of us locally. And that created some of its own challenges. Specialized skills in the battery field is growing and growing fast, but locally it's still a challenge. We're trying to do a lot of this during the COVID pandemic as well. We battled through evaluations, trying to do it during lockdown. These are some of the typical challenges, and the organization itself, the situation we find ourselves in, and the changes within the organization. In terms of not so much the regulatory framework, but it's how the utilization within that framework and getting to grips with how we execute and manage within that framework was also some of the key challenges that we've had. We still feel there's still some significant work we need to do around the National Industrial Participation Program together with local development and industrialization. And there's probably an opportunity for maybe reconsideration in terms of the 100 megawatt limits that are currently, that we thought could have been an opportunity for Eskom utilization. But we've managed outside of that, and we've continued. So, Chair, thank you. That was my presentation for now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. You still managed to keep well within the time. We appreciate that. All right, so you can keep the presentation on the screen in case the members want to ask questions, perhaps in respect of one or two of your slides. But I'll now like to invite our members of the ELS to then ask questions to the presenter. And by the way, look, we would really appreciate it if you could also email us the presentation. It makes it a whole lot easier, I think, even for us to make reference to the slides.
No, 100%. I believe it was done, but we will resend it. We have an issue with that. Thank you, Chair.
All right, no, thank you. Members, questions, please. Starting with Madame Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Mr. Walker, for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions, Chairperson, and my first question relates to jurisdiction. I think it will be amiss of me as the member of the energy regulator if I don't pose this question regarding NERSA's powers in granting licenses for operation of storage infrastructure, to the extent that this battery storage system, it is meant as one of its primary purposes to store energy, to convert it in a storable manner, and then store it and release it later when it is required. So I just want to find out how should NERSA deal with that question of its powers in the Electricity Regulations Act for licensing of storage infrastructure? Can you assist us with that as an applicant here? If you can start off with that question. And then the second thing that I would like to find out is the extent to which battery storage is dealt with in the existing grid code, so that we can be comfortable to the extent that the regulatory framework around battery storage or just storage systems, it is not yet sort of developed, at least from our side. But one could get comfort if the industry, working closely with the regulator, at least there is a grid code that we may have to make mention of the storage infrastructure, how it should be managed, and also issues of dispatch that may need to be dealt with in the grid code and other rules pertaining to that. Can you also just enlighten us, or at least advise the regulator here, not necessarily in the form of advice, but just to inform the regulator as to how this particular infrastructure, once it's at the operation stage, will be dealt with, so that there's transparency in the way in which it should be operated, as well as the dispatch and other technical services associated with it through the grid code. So that is the second question that I would like to understand, how this is supposed to be managed. And then the third question relates to the location of this infrastructure in the network nodes, be it transmission or distribution. I would like to understand, in terms of this project, phase 1 as well as phase 2, whether the location of this energy storage systems will be in the transmission network as well as in the distribution network. Can I just get clarification on the location, so that I can also have an appreciation of its benefits in this network, in the operation of these networks? In particular, which is now question number 4 that is linked to this question, is the extent or the capability of this energy storage system in relieving transmission congestion. Can I be educated on that particular issue? How capable is this system in terms of relieving the transmission congestion system? Because that, I think, also could assist a great deal in terms of costs. If there's lots of investment at the generation level, which will then have an impact on the transmission network in terms of congestion, and therefore investments that may be required to upgrade the transmission system or network in order to relieve congestion. So I just wanted to understand whether this system that we're dealing with here has some capability of relieving transmission congestion. Then the 5th question that I have relates to the recovery of the cost of putting this system in place in the form of a tariff. I would like to understand how is this a project going to be compensated once it's at the operation stage, from a viewpoint of a tariff, or at least I would like to just have an understanding of the impact on the tariff when it's commissioned. This becomes important because in all of these solutions that are proposed, some of which we must also from our side as the regulator make sure that they are demand-driven solutions when we come up with when they are renewable projects. So to the extent that we bring in this kind of infrastructure, it becomes important also to think about the impact of such infrastructure in terms of cost on the consumer. And this might actually come through a tariff Hence the question that I'm asking regarding your idea as you have come up with this project, your idea of a compensation mechanism, of which mechanism must also take into consideration the demand side and the impact thereof. The second question that I have relates to the lifespan of this battery technology. As you have indicated quite clearly, that the level of maturity is still very shaky, and we also still need some skills locally. But this question in particular is one where it could assist us, particularly when we do not have an existing regulatory framework, even for the recovery of cost for a battery storage system. Now, one would like to understand what is the sort of lifespan of this technology if we were to think about issues of recovery of the cost and sort of consider maybe some over what period of time that cost needs to be recovered, and also in a manner that is not going to be detrimental to consumers that are receiving energy that is supported by this system. Lastly, Chairperson, I would like to find out about the capacity that is going to be brought by phase one of this project in terms of annual energy output that that is associated with phase one. If that can be clarified, I might have missed it as they went through the tables. I think it was a bit fast. So if I can just be clarified in terms of phase one, what is the associated annual energy output, and also in phase two, and perhaps so that we can get a better understanding as well of the cost and the tariffs that might have to be paid with regards to the cost associated with phase one, as well as the output, energy output associated with phase one. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Massetti. Advocate Sithole, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, and also let me thank Mr. Walker and his team for the presentation. I just want to focus on some of the lessons that have been shared with us that were learned through the BESS program. And one of them in the slide, it says that there is a lack of BESS skills within the country. And I just wanted to ask the Eskom team as to how are they intending to ensure that the required skills are acquired for this particular program. And again, Chair, there is an indication made to say that the regulatory framework around the BESS in SA is still being developed or refined. And I just want to ask the team in terms of the countries that they have been. I think there was a mention of the US and UK. And my question is, what would they say in their view are the key regulatory tools that should be in place to regulate the BESS? And lastly, Chair, if they can just share with us what are the safety issues related to the use of the BESS, Chair. I will stop there, Chair, for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. By the way, both yourself, Mr. Walker and Mr. Singwa, I forgot to indicate that I assume that we are writing the questions. So I just assumed, I should have warned you that you should have a pen and paper and just take the questions from the members. Can I just add a few from my side? The first question that I have, you mentioned that battery storage actually provides ancillary services. I just want to get an understanding. I'd always understood that batteries provide active power, but you've indicated in your presentation that they can provide reactive power. Maybe just kindly educate me on that. That's the first one, and maybe any other. I saw the other ancillary services that are provided, frequency, for instance, modulation. Can I understand that? If you can clarify that a little bit for me, because I assume that it actually supports both over and under. If you know, in terms of frequency, if you can just clarify that a little bit for me, I'd appreciate that. You did talk about these are lithium-ion batteries. The next question is, I just wanted to find out, with this, it seems to me that the battery storage presents an opportunity for reduction of curtailment of wind, or curtailment of wind energy. Is that a fair assumption? And why, if that is the case, did we not perhaps locate these battery storages around the areas that have got lots of wind potential, especially in areas where Eskom is currently forced to, or the systems operator is currently forced to curtail wind energy? Is that not supposed to be a better location? If you can just maybe indicate that, or was that thought, was that idea considered, and why was it discarded if it was? And I guess going forward, is that going to be the case, that perhaps we could be looking at battery storage, especially one that does not have its own energy generate or electricity generation linked to it, but it's linked to either grid or other sources of electricity? Does it present an opportunity? So it's just a question there. Just confirm for me that all of the systems that we've designed are all intended to run for 4 hours. And can I then, if that's the case, it seems to me that it's really just meant to just deal with the evening peak. Is that the case? Or in the designs that you are, in your designs, did you look at the morning peak as well? Just indicate for me. It seems to me that at least the 80 megawatt system that I saw there with 320 megawatt hours, that it seems to be designed to run for 4 hours, providing active power. Maybe it links back to my earlier question on the reactive power as well. The next question for me, which is not clear, and I think it's going to become important as we go forward, as I guess this happens with all of the other private sector applications, is that a system needs to be able to indicate its expected tariff as a standalone project. Can we kindly maybe just, you would have computed what you think would be the expected tariff that could emerge from this? Can we indicate it currently, please? Maybe on basically indicating it in 2 ways. The first one is that these projects, as we indicated, are basically funded using concessional funding, and they're also grid. They are actually going to be charged using electricity. So what do you expect the tariff to operate the systems would be on average? Maybe they may differ from one system to another depending on location. But what would you consider the average tariff would be? Firstly, as a concessionary, based on concessionary funding and grid fed. But I would then wanted to have a question linked to that, that if these projects were projects by an independent power producer, for instance, privately funded, with using so money is sourced commercially, what do you think the tariffs would have been, especially if they were not going to be charged, if the batteries are not charged using grid electricity. Because I guess the assumption here is that that the current challenges in South Africa, which there might be the case, but the assumption is that there will always be overcapacity at night. That can be can be considered to be virtually free. That will charge these batteries. But what if at night also there are capacity constraints? Or what if the energy that's there, the electricity that's there, is used to maybe charge other things like pump storage and things like that? So when you design a system like that, it must therefore be able to be a standalone. So I guess what I'm asking is, what would be the expected tariff of the same systems that you have if they were privately funded and standalone systems? So those are the questions from me to both yourselves, colleagues. We'll give you 10, maybe 15 minutes to respond. But remember, you can always then respond in writing for all of the questions that we have not had an opportunity to respond to, or if you want to provide additional details, we'll give you 7 days to actually provide us with additional information. But over to both of you, Mr. Walker and Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for members of the board. I cannot ask for 1 minute. I just want to consolidate amongst our team here. We're sitting in one area. I will come back to you within a minute, and then we can be clearly allocate the responses, if you don't mind.
Do consider the fact that it's only the two of you that have been sworn in. So if you're going to ask anybody else to respond, 100%. They would have to be sworn in. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Walker, remember, you can still provide answers in writing. So if you don't mind, just worried about the time. Mr. Walker.
Chairperson, we can give them 5 to 8 minutes. We can just ask people to just bear with us on that as they are trying to coordinate the responses. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, I guess so. But I mean, the issue that maybe what we can then do is to just take a 4 or 5 minute break, and then we'll start again at 10, so people can then also take a comfort break. So, Mr. Walker, we'll come back. We'll start again at 10:03. Thanks. Walker, just checking if you are ready to start in a minute.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, we are. We're back.
All right.
And I'm assuming all the members are back.
I would have to assume so, members. Maybe by just thumbs up, if you can indicate. Advocate, Madam Maseti, I can see. Advocate Sitole? Thank you. The members are back, so you can proceed, sir.
Thank you, Chair. What in our quick discussions, what we've realized clearly between ourselves and amongst our team, the tariff-related questions, and that refers to Madam Maseti's questions around the recoveries. There was similar question later from the chair as well as advocate around the recovery of the funds and the associated tariffs. So I want to take that opportunity, if you would allow me, Chair, that we respond to that one formally, and then we can cover the costs and the tariffs associated with IPPs ourselves, and package that whole thing and then submit it to NERSA, and we will do that within the regulated 7 days, if you don't mind on that one, Chair. And why I'm saying it, I won't do justice to the response if I do not involve our tariff and regulatory people with me when I submit it. Safe to say, they'll do that. In the RFD, we did give a high-level indication of between 55 cents to 2 rand, but I want to formalize the response, a proper response on all those issues, if you don't mind, Chair.
Much appreciated. Granted. Thanks. We can proceed.
And the second big one, Chair, is around the regulatory, the jurisdiction, and the regulatory framework. Let's start with the jurisdiction, Chair. In the process, when we started, we engaged the regulator quite extensively around the battery, or around BESS in our environment. And then, of course, we've acted on the advice of NERSA at this point, to get to this point that we are basically saying, we're following your instructions. So we're taking guidance from the NERSA on how the jurisdiction matter can be dealt, can be better utilized or better sourced. But we can respond formally on that one as well, in that sense, as around the jurisdiction issue, Chair, if you don't mind as well.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, on the international learning points around the grid code, there's a number of points from the team. I will get the regulatory team, will document that as well, and we will give a formal response on those ones as well, in terms of our lessons learned around the regulatory framework that we believe can be incorporated into a NERSA or future framework that can assist. The items that we are much more comfortable around, so responding to now, I'm going to ask between myself and my colleague, is around the current work. So let me start first. I will put up on screen the 2 phases in terms of, and then we can discuss phase 1, phase 2 briefly in terms of the capacities while we're in that response, and we can look at the distribution of where these substations are. So if you give me a second, I'll put it up.
Chairperson, I'm back.
Yes, Ms. Songo, please proceed.
Yes, Chairperson, thank you. In terms of the questions that have been asked, the first one is on the capacity. The total capacity for phase 1 is 1,440 megawatt hours, which translates to 530 gigawatt hours per year. For phase 2, it's 616 megawatt hours, which translates to 224 gigawatt hours. And then in terms of those are the sizes of the battery, of the capacity. And then in terms of the location, almost all of them are located at the distribution substation, which is the 132 kV bus bar, highest voltage, except for Kiwano, which is the Uppington substation, which is connected to the transmission 400 to 132 kV Uppington substation. And the reason as to why these locations are like that, Kiwano has got PV as well, and Rietfontein in the Northern Cape next to Namibia. It is because these were considered as demo substations to check how would PV and BESS work together. That is how Uppington comes to be like that. Now, in terms of the capabilities and extent on relieving the transmission congestion, Chairperson, the design of the BESS, our answer also on the number of hours, which you asked, Chairperson. The design of the BESS is such that it can be switched on and last a minimum of 4 hours. The design of the choice of the 4 hours was premised on the fact that peak loading starts at around 5 o'clock in the evening and lasts up to, say, around 9 p.m. So that is how this was premised. So the specification that we sent out into the market said that you must have a minimum of 4 hours of battery availability. So in those 4 hours, to answer the question on congestion at the same time, if all the 200 megawatts is available, has been charged during the day, it's 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., we are required one unit of say 600 megawatts is out. If you switch on the 200 megawatt BESS for 4 hours, in a sense, you avoid having to switch on one unit. You will not feel that you don't have one unit in the system. And that is how it is being perceived. Now, in terms of how it will actually work in the system in terms of congestion, we are looking at this as a pilot. Transmission, and as part of the current DMRE procurement program, it is premised on our learning experiences that we've got. It means that if we have, say, 1,000 megawatts for 4 hours, that is 4,000. That will be 4,000 megawatt hours. But with the new technology, this is going to almost about 6 to 8 hours. That means we might avoid stage 1 or stage 2 load shedding if this is now connected at the transmission at the bigger substations. Now, the other issue on that note, on this note, the lifespan of the project is expected to be a 20-year project. But however, the batteries, depending on the cycles, can be replaced depending on how regularly they are used. Let's say about 10 or 8 years, that has been built into the overall price of the project and the technical specifications of the project. Then there is also the question that was asked here by Advocate Stolle on the lack of best skills. We picked that up from day one, and at each and every stage, we have designed a mechanism which is such that there is a transfer of skills. For example, I am a planning specialist with my team. When we started, we engaged services of DNGV from Netherlands and the UK, who had the experience in how to plan and integrate battery energy storage systems into the network. And we have developed a skill. We didn't have anybody in the country. We have now an expert that we've developed, and going ahead now, we've got WSP, which we're working on. In their specific fields, they've installed several items on transformers and inverters and the like, and we've gone around the country, and we're ensuring that institutions such as the the universities of technologies, we've visited them and we've identified what is required, such as the inverters and the like. And going ahead, on the construction side, we've got a 5-year maintenance and operational plan in all the clusters all over the country, wherever it is, be it in Northern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape and the like. We have identified skills and youngsters that we want to upskill so that when this thing is done during implementation, they are part and parcel of this. So when they leave the country, the contractors, we will remain with skills, knowing what we are doing and understanding exactly the nitty-gritties of the technology. Now, in terms of safety, I think my colleague Luke might have addressed that on fire. The main risk is mainly fire, and we've been monitoring that. For example, in Australia recently, the Tesla plant went down. So in terms of the fact that these are chemicals, we have specified in our EIAs and environmental the amount of cubic meters that must be there for chemicals and the disposal thereof, as well as also our own social issues, the crime of theft, because batteries are a big source of attraction. So we are what we can call social engineering the local communities, people to understand what this means and where do we locate the BESS in the substation and protect it and ensure a level 3 type of security. And now in terms of the Chairperson, just give me Chairperson. I want to ensure that I'm logical in terms of answer all your questions. You asked a number of questions, Chairperson, on the use of BESS. You mentioned ancillary services. We have specified each and every usage. In terms of education on this, for each and every line, I would rather send a detailed written response, but at a high level, I will highlight where we are, because some of the terms might come out a little bit too deep, because we'll go into equations which will not help this out a lot. But at a glance, we have classified the usage from ancillary services to frequency response. In other words, where we have located BESS, it was not just a question of Mfundi wishes to have this. It has to have a use in the local network, which is the local constraint. Like, for example, Rietfontein is a local Komani-San people. They've got no electricity. If you look at the curtailment that you mentioned, Mr. Chairperson, curtailment was seen as one aspect, but the number of hours during which curtailment can be used was found to be in the early hours of the day, of which there is light loading. But however, battery energy storage will assist a lot. We mentioned that, and we have done the studies for that. It will curtail. And the current situation is such that the generators have to switch off. But however, with the batteries will absorb that energy which is generated, and then it will allow for more generation to be stored and kept and used as and when it's required, specifically in the morning when we have got early morning load shedding. And then in the written response, I'll add more on that. And then the 4 hours, why? I think I answered that. In terms of active power, the batteries with the inverter is designed in such a manner that what it gives out will be an equivalent power that matches what is in the network. That is why I'm saying when we respond, we'll write that in a much more concise manner. So it matches what is in the output. So it's a black box. It has got what we call a battery management system. And it has got what we call a battery management system, which manages the battery, and so called what we call an energy management system, EMS. And then it has got also its own brains. In other words, it checks and finds out where are we, and then it now sends the required voltage, the required power, and it operates like that. So anything that breaks in there, it's a black box. We have to replace that. I think I have tried. I think I've covered almost the rest of the questions, unless there are other questions that I might have left out, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Chair,
I'd like to comment on one, if you don't mind.
Yes, please, you can proceed.
Yeah, just again, the one around the grid code. I didn't quite cover that one properly, but in terms of the grid code, Chair, there was work done within the Eskom environment, and I think we have shared it with NERSA already. I think it's currently there in the with NERSA for review and basic consideration. But we will include that in the full response when we cover the framework item as well, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Colleagues, thank you. I think you've done a great job in your responses, but I see Madam Massetti still has a quick follow-up. Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think I wanted them to respond to the question on the grid code as to the extent to which battery storage is covered and how they envisage that NERSA will be in a position to monitor compliance and other sort of standards in the maintenance of that infrastructure once it is licensed. So that is the part that did not come out, but I am fine, Chairperson, if you direct that it be covered in writing as an additional response. And I think the other issue that was not clearly covered is one well, I think is a follow-up on the lifespan of the battery system. I think it would have been much more helpful if we have been given maybe some information or data with regards to this lifespan where they mentioned 20 years to indicate, I mean, from the countries that they mentioned earlier, which is Texas in the US as well as the UK, if they are in a position to then demonstrate how long this technology could last. Because remember, we don't have the regulatory framework that could give us a sense on this. But again, in terms of this technology to last that long, would it not be a function of the climate if we have so much of high temperatures perhaps in our country compared to those countries and those towns where this technology is located? Will that also not be a factor to consider just in terms of looking into the lifespan of this technology? If that can also be clarified, Chairperson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Massetti. And I guess, Mr. Walker, Mr. Songo, in terms of your detailed response later, please provide that if you can assist with that, if that information is available, both from California as well as from the UK. And any other place that you may have information from. But I see your hand is up, Mr. Walker. Did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add quickly on the grid code one, as I said, but we will include it in the response again. But clearly, the grid code committee has sat on the issue of batteries, and we have submitted a full input into what we think the regulatory framework should look like in the grid code. And that is currently with NERSA. So I think it is there now being reviewed and evaluated. So maybe we can probably make some reference to it when we respond. Okay. On the other one, on the lifespan, the skills, maybe Fundi can just give a quick 5 minutes. Thanks, Chair.
Could I guide differently, colleagues? I think we have agreed that you will provide the answers in writing. So that you don't shoot from the hip. You have provided high-level responses, but we would really appreciate detail before the decision is made. Which detail, by the way, if you can indicate which aspects you may want to consider confidential, because clearly all the members of the public that may have attended, they may also want to have access to the information that you are providing, in which case will then avail on our website. That is considered not to be confidential. With that, I would actually like to bring the public hearing to a close with an indication from where I'm sitting that I think the electricity supply industry is changing. It is very welcomed. It's traditionally been linked in South Africa with coal, with all of its impact on climate change, and that our contribution to minimizing the impact of climate change will definitely is much welcomed, and also just the appropriate use of different electricity or energy provision is much appreciated. That, for instance, if we can avoid using ramping up and ramping down technology that was not geared up to be done like that, to be run like that, to one where we could store the energy and release it as and when necessary, that is very much welcomed. And I think the issue here is always going to be issues of cost recovery, of course, and the impact and the choices to give to consumers in terms of making those correct decisions, in terms of cost, whether they provide that energy themselves or it's provided, they get it from the grid, and at what cost. So those are always going to be important, and hence the questions that we're asking around tariffs. And also just to indicate that clearly it's not that all of the energy going forward or electricity from the battery will be funded using concessionary funding. It may not always be provided by the state. We would like we expect that there will be private sector participation in that space as well. And therefore we need to be quite clear about what the tariff implications of that might be. So that would really stand guided. And as indicated, this is provided for in the IRP, clearly provided for in the IRP and very much welcomed. And therefore, we are, I guess, as indicated, some of these aspects have been brought forward in terms of the IRP. IRP may have envisaged timelines that are in later years. And this has been brought forward. That also been welcomed because the challenges South Africa are facing are today. So with that, I just wanted to say, just to thank you, thank Eskom for this conversation, and also I think it's been illuminating for most people, for most of us. We now at least are better equipped to understand what the term is about, to also better equipped to make the decisions that we need to make. With that, I'd like to thank everybody that has joined in on this conversation and bring this meeting to a close. And the public hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and members and staff within ELS.